If you've reached the intermediate level in a new language, fantastic. Your language skills are good enough to get by in most situations. But if you stop studying now, you are taking a big risk. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why you're taking a big risk if you stop improving after the intermediate level, and some techniques to move from intermediate to advanced. Oh, and you're also going to meet some of the StoryLearning team too and hear what their secrets are.
C'était très intéressant de voir leur style de vie et aussi qu'est-ce qu'ils font dans leur vie.
Okay, so you feel pretty confident in your new language. You know the main grammar rules, you can understand a lot of what you read in books or hear in movies. You can even survive a conversation with a complete stranger at the pub. And you should be really, really proud of yourself. Most people never make it this far. But there's a danger. You see, despite all your hard work and progress, it's still possible to forget the language if you don't keep it up. Now, as most experienced language learners will tell you, it's only once you've learned a language to an upper intermediate or advanced level that there's no longer any risk of forgetting it, even after years, because that's the level where the language seems to get drilled in and imprinted on your brain. So that alone is a good reason to keep improving past intermediate level. And then there's this.
As soon as you stop noticing your progress, you are probably in the intermediate plateau. Okay, so if you keep going and you have the impression that you're not making much progress, that's probably because you are in the intermediate plateau. My best tip to get out of the intermediate plateau would be to stop doing always the same thing. I mean, if you want to change things up and to get to the advanced level, you need to start doing things differently compared to what you have been doing it so far, like from beginner to intermediate.
The intermediate plateau is a real pain because it can be very hard to see where you're making progress. And if you don't keep improving...
Anyway, it's been 2 years. I mean, isn't there like a statute of limitations on that?
Statute. What? Statute of limitations. It's not a statue.
Mistakes really can get stuck in your brain.
The most important thing when it comes to reaching an advanced level, getting through that intermediate plateau is consistency, as is with, advancing from any level to the next. But also focusing on getting out of your comfort zone. I think once somebody gets to the intermediate level, they've gotten into a routine that they're comfortable with. They do the same things, and that consistency in that routine has gotten them up to that point. And you reach a point where that isn't difficult enough anymore. So you need to push yourself, just like anything else. If you want to get good at anything, you need to be a little bit uncomfortable to see progress. And if that means not watching movies with subtitles in your language so that you're understanding everything that happens, or series or whatever, it could mean that. It could mean having more interactions with native speakers. It could mean using more native content, because maybe some students get comfortable using graded content or adapted content for learners, and really kind of, I guess, using more native content would really help.
The first thing to get into your head is that you're going to need a massive amount of input, reading and listening. And I mean way more than before. If you want to keep improving, this is full-on dedication time. You need to expand your vocabulary, deepen and extend your knowledge and use of grammar, learn more native-like expressions. And the only way this is going to happen is if you're using the language every single day consistently until it's just second nature.
My love for certain languages is so powerful, so strong, that I want to go deeper and deeper, as deep as possible in my knowledge of that language.
I think writing is super powerful. I think that's a great activity, because you can be, I often explain it to my students, like you're like you can be like a mad scientist without anybody judging you, right? Because you don't have anybody waiting for you to deliver a message, to speak to them. Nobody's there looking at you, waiting for you to say something. So then you have this kind of calm situation where you can play around with the sentence structure. You can think, okay, this expression, I want to say it like this in English. or whatever your native language is. And how could I say that in the language I'm learning? Maybe look it up, see if you can find something similar, or, looking for synonyms at the advanced level. Finding synonyms is very important. So you're not repeating the same thing over and over again. And you can see that in your writing. You can't see that in your speech because you're just kind of throwing it out, right? You're just, whatever comes to your mind, the fastest thing comes out, the easiest thing. So when you're writing, you can just play around with the language and really, I think it's a really good activity.
I could not agree more. There is no performance pressure with writing either. So it makes a superb way to show up gaps in what you can express and whether you've really internalized the grammar. And get creative too. Write down interesting scenarios or reactions to things that you see. This will give you a chance to express yourself in ways that you wouldn't when you're just casually speaking, because you'll have the time and space to dig out all of that passive vocabulary that you're sitting on.
So something that's really helped me get from intermediate through to advanced levels in languages is reading. And I think reading is really, really important because it allows you to get a lot of exposure to the language, to pick up lots and lots of vocabulary, some of which you'll end up being able to use actively, other vocabulary which you'll just end up learning how to recognize passively. But it gives you a lot of exposure to that, and also to lots of different grammar forms in context. And the reason I like reading is that it's extremely difficult to get enough exposure to the language to reach really high levels if you're just dependent on practicing by speaking with people. And so reading is a great way around that. You can improve really quickly by reading a lot. It's a lot of fun as well. And it can be challenging, but it's also something that you can kind of scale up. You can start with things that are easier and gradually work up to harder and harder texts. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important element of reaching higher levels.
So this one all comes down to what you do and don't get out of your conversations with people. Thing is, as great and essential as speaking is, you need to be challenged if you want to advance. So the question becomes, how much are people really challenging you? Because honestly, most people use a pretty limited range of words in everyday conversation. And reading books written for native speakers, that adults, not kids, will give you a ton of advanced vocabulary that you won't hear commonly in daily conversation. But here's the thing. The reason you can't just avoid it all, native speakers do know these words. They might not use them, but they know them. So one day you're sitting at dinner and they start talking about brilliant ways to save the planet. Can you hold your own in this conversation? Do you have the vocabulary to join in? There is a little caveat here that we'll come back to in just a moment. Picture this, you've learned 5 new words that mean kind of the same thing, and now you want to sound more creative when you speak. Brilliant, you can choose from your list of synonyms. Only problem is, there will be subtle differences in the meanings, and it's a common mistake with intermediate learners using cool words in the wrong situation.
That's a good point with the synonyms, and that happens a lot. And I think also my highest level students, what I see is they're very good at seeing reaction of, or my reaction to the reaction of native speakers when they're kind of looking out for it. They're aware. If I kind of like, I don't know, make a face or react a little differently when they say a specific word in a specific context, they might say, would you say that like that? Would you say this word in that situation? So being, like you said, don't like say, okay, the dictionary says this, so it's this. Always be a little bit skeptical.
This is why you need to read a lot. The issue of having the wrong synonym is resolved by reading, because that's where you get the ultimate context from, and you won't even need a dictionary. Now, this brings us to a very important point about reading. If you want to reach advanced levels in your language, no more kids' books, no more stories for 13-year-olds, even my books of short stories. Once you're pushing to an advanced level, you need to cast them aside and read native level books, preferably in genres that you love and topics you love talking about. That is how you get the most difficult, nuanced grammar patterns sinking in, advanced vocabulary becoming second nature, and just feeling like you own the language, through reading. I actually have a great video on tips for making the most out of reading, so you might want to check that out too. And if you enjoyed this video so far, please show your support. Click those like buttons. You know what to do.
Listen to podcasts on your favorite topic without caring so much about understanding everything, without caring so much about taking note of all the words that you didn't understand. Just, doing some extensive listening or extensive reading. That's the word for it, which is the opposite of intensive listening or reading, of course, which would mean to stop at every sentence and trying to understand every single bit or chunk of what is said or written. So doing some extensive reading or listening, relaxing, and that's something that you can do to kind of take a break.
So this is extensive listening, which is the opposite to intensive listening. And this is something you can do just to avoid burnout. So you just absorb the language.
I would understand everything that he said, but then when it came time to say it, I blanked because I was more focused on understanding the individual parts of the vehicle and not what it was carrying. So that activity helped me to start to, instead of focus on the vehicle, the words, the sentences, to imagine it and picture it in my mind. And then I had more of it helped me to have more of a natural connection to the language.
Also, the more that you're interested in the podcast topic, the more likely you are to remember the new words being used. And it's going to be stories you can bring up in your conversations in that very natural way, of course, which will also make you more interesting to talk to. So win-win.
I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've also what's the expression? Made a fool of myself when speaking foreign languages. I once ordered at an ice cream shop here in Brussels when my French was still not so good. I ordered a bad word instead of an ice cream. So I can't say the word, but still, I've used a swear word instead of an ice cream. So a cone. So the best thing to do in these cases is, in my opinion, to laugh about your own mistakes. And by laughing in the face of your mistakes, you are actually empowering yourselves and transforming the bad experience or an experience that could be bad into a positive one, an experience that allowed you to learn something. And I can assure you, you will not repeat the same mistake. The more you laugh about it, the more likely you are not to repeat that mistake.
For sure. And when you do have intensive listening days, this is where you should make an active effort to understand every detail of what the person is saying.
When I was really trying to focus on getting better, so I fell into the trap of getting comfortable reading because I read extensively and I wasn't getting enough social interaction to kind of get the feedback of native speakers. So maybe in the beginning, I would say something that was like very elegant, but nobody would say that thing or use that vocabulary word. And I'd get, oh, that word, I don't know about that.
So in this scenario, all those books and podcasts have paid off. Your reading and listening skills are impressive, but just like choosing the wrong word, you might not be so great at speaking in a natural way. Well, guess what? Your skills don't necessarily improve equally all at the same time. When do they ever? So now you need to go on a bit of a mission. Practice those language skills that are not as strong.
I got an online tutor and I had him read me an article out loud. I'd listen to the article and then he would make me summarize what he just said. I couldn't see the article or anything. So I had to take notes, summarize what he just said. And then afterwards, he would give me feedback in regards to mistakes that I would make. I would take those mistakes from each class, and I would then use spaced repetition software with those. So I'd put them on, flashcards and review them when I had free time.
Great way to work out those problem areas. It's getting used to actually using phrases that you know instead of saving them for a rainy day. And this is another example of the difference between an intermediate level of reading and advanced level of reading. Take lessons that target your specific weaknesses. Deliberately learn words that will fill holes in your vocab. Laser focus on things that you find tricky, how to use the subjunctive correctly, for example, and eliminate those weaknesses one by one.
This is something that we can do every day, and it's also free. Speaking to myself. I imagine having a conversation, or I imagine explaining one of my points or my opinion about a certain topic in a given language. And this brings me to use these words very simply, or to use the expressions that you would typically use to presenting an argument or your opinion about a topic.
This is a fantastic exercise, and the best part is that you can do it anywhere at any time.
Decades of psychology research show that talking to yourself is completely normal. In fact, most, if not all of us, engage in some form of self-talk every single day.
So what are you going to talk about if you want to advance? Well, try picking subjects that are not common for you, not part of your daily life. Tell yourself a story. You need to learn to talk easily about pretty much anything, whether it's with a friend or the person in the mirror. Basically, you got to step outside your comfort zone. One brilliant opportunity, if you get the chance, is to work in the language that you are learning. Now, years ago, when I was learning French, I actually got a job at a youth hostel in Paris. It was incredibly tough and fast moving. I was way outside my comfort zone, answering the phone in French with a queue of people waiting to check in at the front desk. It was a baptism of fire. But this kind of working situation forces you to improve your accuracy fast. You learn how things are really said. Now, this is obviously not possible for everyone, but in my case, this experience that I had in France working in another language was top of mind when I was creating the advanced levels of our story learning courses, because I wanted to, it's very important for me to introduce real language into the story so that you get a taste of what it's really like to be in the country surrounded by native speakers. And yes, in case you didn't know, we now have not only intermediate, but also advanced story learning courses in many languages. There's a link below if you'd like to find out more.
Si en medio del mar hay un movimiento en el fondo, se agita el agua y se forma una ola gigante.
One really fun way to advance is to find a native speaker who you really admire. YouTube is good for this, movies, but they do need to speak at a high level. That's the whole point, right? So look for someone that you just love watching and listening to. When you were a kid, that was one of your parents. And it works, right? You grew up in their image, whether you like it or not. Now, this one is all about emulation. So what you do is you practice the language by copying their intonation, their accent, even their style and the way that they phrase things. You can copy the way they walk if you like. It will help you embody that personality, at least until you can do this in your own style. And believe me, that is coming. Just hang in there. You've got this.
If you're worried about making mistakes, or you feel anxious about making mistakes when speaking a language, I think the thing to remember is to kind of go back to thinking about what the whole point of learning the language is in the first place. And for most of us, it's about communication. And so it's better to use your language skills as imperfect as they are in order to try and communicate with people and improve and practice than not to speak at all. And ironically, this can become more difficult the further you go on in some ways, because you hold yourself to higher standards. So there's an initial challenge in kind of starting to speak because there's a fear of making mistakes. But once you get over that, then you start to be able to actually use what language you do have to communicate with people. That can be quite empowering. But it can be tricky as you get to a more advanced level, because you tend to judge yourself more harshly than when you do make mistakes. And you'll often find a situation where you say something, and as you reach an advanced level, you immediately know that what you said was wrong. And that can be frustrating, and you have to kind of resist the temptation to beat yourself up about that, because it's all part of the learning process. And it's only by going through that you can get to a point where those things just become natural and those mistakes don't happen.
If the fear of making mistakes is what is stopping you from talking to people at a higher level, well, I hope you were listening. See, we make mistakes in our native language too. That's the way people speak naturally.
Early worm gets the worm. Another worm? Like, are they friends?
This early bird gets the worm.
If you are aiming for perfection, you will not sound natural. In fact, it's a good sign of how advanced you are if you immediately know when you've said something wrong.
I remember my first year in Spain, I used to go on trips, weekend trips to different parts of Spain. And most of the people that did this were expats, or they were, students, international students. So just because we're in Spain, we're speaking in Spanish together. That's our common language. And I think that, that helped a lot to just kind of get rid of that fear and have social interactions with other people in the language.
This is kind of an ideal situation where you're completely surrounded by native speakers, but you're not the only one learning. But what if you can't travel? Can you still achieve advanced level in a language?
We live probably in the best possible era for people who want to learn languages from the comfort of their home and cannot travel to the country where the language is spoken. Why? Because we have the internet, and the internet allows us to immerse ourselves in a language, and almost as if we were in the country where the language is spoken. You have access to pretty much any content that is created for native speakers. So it's no excuse any longer. You cannot use this as an excuse. The fact that you can't go to, I don't know, to Japan to learn Japanese, because you can actually bring Japan into your home through your computer and your smart TV and whatever exists in today's world. So my suggestion would be to use a VPN to immerse your computer into the foreign country and just get bombarded with content in your target language.
Immerse your computer in that target language. I like that. And finding a real person to talk to these days is so easy. All you do, head over to LanguaTalk, find a tutor, and get started. Link to LanguaTalk in the description too.
It's very, very important to accept the fact that nobody is perfect and nobody will ever be perfect. And if you take that away from your even possible goals, it's liberating if you think about it. It's liberating to know that nobody will ever be perfect in any language or in anything of life for that matter. And that even native speakers make lots and lots of horrible mistakes every single day. So who are we to, as foreigners, as learners, to be better than even than native speakers? It's impossible. So let's just forget about it and enjoy the ride. This is something that I also have maybe as a strength. I am very patient, and I don't care how long it's going to take to get there. I just embark on the journey. I enjoy the process, and I look forward to the point where, or to the moment where I can say, wow, I got to an advanced level, and I know I'm going to get there if I keep going, but I don't care how long it takes.
Well, there you go. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells around native speakers, you got to find a way to relax. Remember that this was supposed to be fun. So keep it fun. You are going to get there.
Something else that's important when you're trying to reach an advanced level in a language is to recognize that advanced isn't a single thing. Different skills within language learning will evolve at different speeds. And so it's quite normal for somebody who gets most of their practice through speaking, for example, to be able to speak very well, but to struggle when it comes to reading more complicated texts or being able to write. Likewise, it's also quite common that somebody who doesn't get much speaking practice can be really, really good at reading and know quite a lot of vocabulary and actually have very good grammar, but they struggle to actually speak. So I think it's important to recognize that and to think about what being at an advanced level means for you. What are the skills you're most going to focus on? I do think it's important to practice, all different skills. So, listening, reading, writing, and speaking.
When I was having conversations with my friends or with acquaintances about very specific topics, such as, I don't know, global warming or the development of technologies nowadays, the relationship with China, and I mean, geopolitical stuff. And when you get to that, well, that's probably because you have achieved the advanced level.
Chances are you're not just noticing the little things. Maybe you can't always find the right words, but if you can read and understand faster, it means your brain knows more words than it's letting on. And talking of brains, there is some more brain food for you right over here.